We can get going. Thank you. The hearing will please come to order. Good morning. I'm John Galt, the Lake Forest Park hearing examiner. It is now 10:01 a.m. on February 11, 2026. I welcome you to today's open record hearing. We have one project which has two permits involved in it that is before us this morning. Our applicant is TAEC on behalf of Phoenix Tower International. The owner of the property is the City of Seattle through its subordinate unit, Seattle Public Utilities. The file numbers are 2022-WC-0001 and 2022-CU-0001. They are respectively a wireless communication facility permit and a conditional use permit. We have been advised by our Zoom host, a term that Zoom uses, that we have no members of the general public attending in the audience, that the only participants remotely are those who are on the screen as what Zoom calls panelists. And it would appear to me, as I look at the thumbnail picture of the on-site location, there are no members of the general public there, just two city staff people. That being the case, we will probably deviate maybe a little bit, maybe a lot. It'll depend on how the testimony goes from my normal proceedings. Normally, the hearing's divided into three parts. There's direct testimony, there's rebuttal testimony, and then there are closing statements. And normally, the direct testimony and the rebuttal are heard in the same sequence of presentations, and that is our applicant speaks first, city planning staff second, and members of the public third. Normally, when we get to closing statements, they are available only to the city staff and the applicant in that order. And you'll notice in that sequence that the applicant speaks first and at least has the opportunity, if it wishes to be the concluding speaker. And I will make sure that that part of the process will stay the same. So if our applicant wants to be the last speaker, she will be able to do that. That sequence is appropriate, in my opinion, because the applicant bears the burden of proof. And that simply means that the applicant must show by a preponderance of the evidence that its applications meet the city's requirements for issuance of a wireless communication facility permit and a conditional use permit. The applicant may meet that obligation through documents that are entered into the record, through testimony that's presented during the hearing, or any combination of the both. A conditional use permit is a type 1 application, and the nature of the wireless communications facility permit that's being sought here is such that it is also classified as a conditional use permit under the city code. Conditional use permits are type 1 proceedings. They require a pre-decision open record hearing before the examiner, which is what we are doing this morning. That's followed by up to 10 days for me to consider all of the testimony and the evidence and to issue a written decision. My decision will be a final decision for the city, subject to the right of reconsideration and appeal to Superior Court. I conclude a brief paragraph or two at the end of the decision, or almost at the end of the decision, which explains in brief the reconsideration process and the appeal process. Therefore, I won't go into either of them this morning. Once I've reached my decision, I send it electronically to city staff and city staff then disseminates it to parties of record. I don't think I need to explain much about the parties of record process because I've been advised there are no members of the public here. The folks who submitted written comments, of which there are 5 plus the Duwamish tribes, by submitting those comments, they are parties of record. And the folks who participate in the hearing today are parties of record. The city prefers, I think that's a safe word to use, to distribute the decision electronically via email. And if those of you who are here, especially I would suggest Ms. Raymond, if you're willing to accept email service of the decision once the city gets its hands on it, just let the city staff know and they'll send it to you via email. I'm required to base my decision primarily on the review criteria for wireless communication permits and conditional use permits in general. Those criteria are found respectively in sections 18.68.080 and 18.4.030. I would note that Chapter 18.68 doesn't have a list of permit criteria per se, like the conditional use permit chapter does, but it has requirements for what's mandatorily to be contained in a permit. And there are a couple of sections there. I've cited to section 080, but there's another section that also has things that could be considered as criteria as well. In addition to considering those specific criteria, I do consider other relevant provisions and requirements of city code and city standards, law and rule, and judicial precedent, all applied to the facts that are disclosed by the documents and the testimony entered into our hearing record. I reserve the right to take official notice of applicable case law, provisions of state rules, provisions of the city comprehensive plan, and city ordinances and standards. When it comes time to testify, unless our witness happens to be an attorney at law who is appearing in a representational role, I will recognize the speaker. I'll raise my right hand. The speaker will raise his or her right hand. I will administer the oath to you. You will respond as your conscience dictates. I will then ask you to tell me your name and spell it first and last. I realize full well that we all have little thumbnail pictures on the screen that have our names on them. However, when a person is viewing the recording of this hearing, it is possible to do it just audio only. And if a person is reviewing audio only, they won't see our pictures and they won't know how to spell your name. So that's why I make us all do that. Are there any questions regarding hearing procedures?
No, sir.
None? Are there any objections on jurisdictional grounds or concerns regarding conflict of interest?
No, sir.
No.
Hearing none, we will move along. The city code says that I may make site visits to conducting hearings like this. I remember probably a decade or more ago having a land use application up near the Seattle reservoirs, and I was around the site at that time. But to have a closer view and a more current view, I use Google Earth. And I have typically done that in most of my jurisdiction the last few years. I try to view both overhead imagery and street view imagery wherever it's available. The overhead image that I was able to view was captured July 6th of 2024. So it's a little over, about a year and a half old at this point. The street view images were taken in 2 different months of different years. The imagery on public streets that one can drive a car down was captured in let's see, April of 2025. However, since cars can't go down the path that connects 45th to the park at the north, they apparently have a mobile unit that Google can use to capture that. And that imagery was collected in November of 2024. The city has provided to me and available to the public a list of the documents that have been generated in its review of this application, and which the city staff believes will have either substantive and or procedural value to me as the decision maker. They have numbered these as pre-files 1 through 23. I would note for the record that Exhibit 12 consists of 3 subparts, A, B, and C, so there's actually more than 23 documents. If I'm doing my math right, morning, there'd be 25 total documents. All of them have been available to the public for review on the city's website during the days and weeks leading up to our hearing. I herewith enter into the record of our hearing exhibits 1 through 23, including all subparts. That ends the introductory material, and we can begin our hearing. I've been advised before we started that Ms. Raymond is the applicant's representative, and so if she'd be kind enough to raise her right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you'll be offering in this hearing will be the truth, the whole, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Would you tell us your name and how to spell it, please?
Angela Raymond, ANGELA RAYMOND.
Thank you, Ms. Raymond. Go ahead.
Okay, begin my presentation.
Certainly. You might want to start by telling us what organization you're with.
Of course. Can I share my screen?
Uh,
PowerPoint or no? It's fine if I don't. It's fine. No.
I think it's the green button at the
bottom. No. I just was asking permission.
Oh, you may have. Yes. Okay. I will let me point out that if you anything during your testimony that's not already part of the record, then you will have to make that new document part of the record. Okay. So if you have a different picture than any of the pictures that have already been pre-filed, then we will have to have you provide the city a copy of that picture, and I will give it an exhibit number and enter it in the record. Okay, so my PowerPoint contains all documents that were already in the record, and then it's just some verbiage of my own. Now, why don't we put the whole PowerPoint in the record as the applicant's presentation or hearing PowerPoint? That'd be okay? That would be great. That's how a lot of people do it. Okay, so we have applicants hearing PowerPoint. And that is herewith entered Exhibit 24. And after the hearing's over, you can make sure that Mr. Greetham gets a copy of it, and then he can forward it on to me. Okay. So go ahead. And if you want to share screen and let us look at it. Okay. Is that, are you able to see that? Your view went away, and then now it's just my PowerPoint. Are you in? Are you seeing?
Staff is.
Yes, staff I can see it.
Staff can see it? Okay, because I can't see you anymore, so I didn't know. Okay, so you can see the PowerPoint.
Yes.
Great. All right. Good morning. My name is Angela Raymond, and I'm here on behalf of Phoenix Tower International to present a conditional use permit request for a wireless communication facility. And thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. The proposed this project is to upgrade a existing wireless communication facility by replacing a 42-foot monopole with a new 90-foot stealth monopine. This upgrade is essential to improving wireless capacity, reliability, and emergency communications for the residences of Lake Forest Park. The proposed facility consolidates multiple carriers onto one structure. The monopine is designed specifically to blend in with the surrounding evergreen environment and minimize visibility from nearby residences and public viewpoints. So here's a photo of, this is part of the photo sims that were submitted. So here's a photo simulation of what the facility will look like. And this includes multiple carriers with the antennas being painted green to blend in with the branches. The site characteristics and environmental concerns. So the project is located within a 16.64 acre parcel with an existing reservoir and an established monopole with associated ground equipment. The monopine design will help the structure blend in with the natural environment and its surroundings. There is a lease area expansion proposed to accommodate the monopine and associated equipment for the existing carrier and future carriers. Where tree removal is necessary, according to the urban forest plan, new trees will be planted. And we have also prepared a stormwater and erosion control plan that was located in the construction drawings, all up to that will be reviewed by the building department. And so here's an aerial photo of the project. This is part of the photo simulations. So right here where my cursor is, in the northwest corner of the property is where the existing facility is located, and new facility will be proposed. And just going through some of the photo sims showing different viewpoints. Another up close viewpoint. And there we go. So this proposal has been reviewed under all applicable municipal code provisions, including the city's wireless communication facility standards and conditional use criteria. Staff has confirmed that the project meets all of the code requirements. At a federal level, the facility complies with the FAA regulations, building and electrical code standards, which will be reviewed at further date, and FCC RF emission limits. So there was an RF compliance report that was submitted and demonstrates that emissions will remain far below the RF safety thresholds. So we did receive a few public comments, and I'd like to respond to some of those. So the most common concerns are health impacts and property value. So under the FCC regulations, wireless facilities that operate within the established RF safety limits cannot be denied based on health concerns. And this facility does, in fact, comply with FCC regulations, and the RF report confirms that the emissions will remain well below the maximum allowed public exposure limits. Another common public comment is the property value impact. It's important to note that research on this topic is mixed and inconclusive. And in this case, the proposed structure is a stealth monopine, specifically designed to reduce visibility, protect. The project replaces an existing communication facility, and the new monopine is designed to provide a more softer and compatible design for the surrounding area. So in closing, the upgraded Monopine facility will significantly improve wireless coverage and strengthen emergency communication capacity for the community. The project fully complies with all federal, state, and local regulations. The design minimizes visual impacts, maintains compatibility with surrounding environment, and incorporates mitigation measures to protect site conditions. The staff did review the application in detail and recommended approval. For the reasons stated, I respectfully request approval of the conditional use permit. And thank you for your time. And that does conclude my presentation.
Thank you.
Yes.
Now,
Give me a moment to
I was
stop
going to
sharing.
say, somehow I've got to get the screen back here.
I'll do it. There you go.
Okay, now you're the only one I can see. Let's exit full screen. Let's see if that does it. Yeah. Okay, I'm back where I can see everybody. You said that the staff has recommended approval. The staff has made that recommendation subject to a total of 15 recommended conditions.
Yes.
And they are found on pages 14 and 15 of the staff report, which is our exhibit 1 in the record. Does the applicant have any comments, concerns, questions, objections, what have you, with regard to any recommended conditions?
I have read all of the conditions of approval and I have no comments or objections.
Thank you. There are 2 abbreviations that are used on one of the pages of the plans, is 7, and you may know what they are without even looking to see the diagram, but let me see, where's 7? Okay.
On page
This,
on page 7 of the construction drawings,
yes,
the approved
PDF 7, it's your
exhibit 7.
sheet number C3.
C3. Okay, let me
Okay.
pull it.
CSBC and CSTC, with reference to the materials that make up the access drive. I'm guessing that BC means top course and TC base course, and TC probably stands for top course. But I haven't been able to figure out what CS means.
Okay, can I share my screen and you can point out exactly where those abbreviations are located on the
Sure.
drawings? Okay.
I don't know that I can point out.
Oh, yeah,
I
I
can
wasn't
try and
sure.
direct you.
Okay,
Tell me when you've
shared it. Hold on. So we're going to use this screen and then I'm going to pull up PDF.
I'm wondering if it means crush surfacing base
Okay.
course and crush surfacing top course, but I don't know.
Okay, and then are you able to see sheet C, the sheet you were referring to?
No, not yet.
Okay, sounds good. Share screen. Okay, there we go. Perfect. Okay, and then hold on. Here we go. That should be it.
That's it.
Okay. So
Okay.
we're on sheet C3.
C3. Um, uh, I'll call it an inset. I don't think that's the term the author of this plan would have used, but inset A in the lower left.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
The notations that I'm looking at are written right above the surface of the cross section through the access road. And there's one, I, I can't enlarge your screen, at least I don't think I can. But you'll see there are 2 notations pointing to the 2 different layers of material that will make up the little road, the 12-foot wide road.
Mm-hmm.
And one says
Oh,
Uh,
CSBC. Okay, your
CSBC,
compacted depth CSTC CSBC. So it's
yes.
the type of material.
What's
Um,
CS?
okay. I can try to look through
Is it,
these document. I don't know off the top of my head. It's a
oh,
type of
okay.
compacted
Staff
material, which
reviewed.
I'm sure is in the drawing somewhere. Um,
Is it crushed surfacing? The only reason I'm asking is that the staff report says this is going to be a paved access road. And those terms are not, those shorthand notations are not familiar to me with respect to paved roads. Um, so I'm a little,
I think it's the material underneath.
well, I agree.
Okay,
It's an abbreviation for the material that they're using to
the
build the
compact.
little 12-foot road out of.
Hmm.
I just want to know whether it's a correct descriptor were I to say that you're going to build a 12-foot wide paved access road, or is it a 12-foot wide crushed stone access road, or something else? Coral shells. I don't know.
It was proposed by city Seattle to do paved, and so we were just doing what they proposed or they required.
Seattle wants it paved.
I believe so. It's been a
Okay.
lot of back and forth in over a year since we've last spoken to them, but
Okay,
um,
I won't worry about it. I will continue to use the descriptor of it being a paved road. Thank
okay,
you.
Mr.
Um,
Development.
And Mr. Gold, I haven't been sworn in, but we have a staff perspective if you would like it.
can we hold that until we have the staff comments here in just a minute?
Sure. Thank you.
Okay. Uh, the existing pole, at least from the pictures that are available in the record, appears to me to be without any typical cellular system antennas, either flat panel or whip antennas or anything. There doesn't seem to be anything attached to it. It's this
Where?
42-foot tall cylindrical pole painted green with nothing on it. And yet it's described as having a carrier on it now. So can you help me understand that?
They're inside the canisters.
Oh, they're inside the pole.
Hmm. Yeah, they're
Ah,
inside the canisters. So it's a stealth pole essentially. It's not necessarily a monopole. It's already existing stealth. So some jurisdiction use that as like a flagpole. Let's have a really
okay.
stout, wide pole. And the canisters are inside, or the antennas are inside the canister.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And the carrier that's currently has its equipment in the pole, that's T-Mobile?
That's correct.
Okay. Okay. Super. Okay. I think that's all the questions I have for you at this point. Thank you very much. Um, let's see, Mr. Greetham, are you going to be the speaker for?
I am.
I've got a black box sitting right in the middle of your face that I can't move, and it says it's where I can choose to leave the webinar, and I don't want to do that. So I Mr. McLean, does the version of this that you're looking at have a black box with a red bar in it right
No,
in front of Mr. Greetham?
no, if you go up to your view on the top right, should be able to change it.
To gallery.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go. Now I can see him. Thank you. Mr. Greetham, raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you'll be offering in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. And for the record, please tell us your name and how to spell it.
David Greetham, Greetham.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead.
All right, I'm David Greetham. As just mentioned, I'm a temporary senior planner with the city. And I want to thank the examiner and the applicant for their intros because I've crossed a lot of things off my list and I won't repeat those. And we'll just sort of hit a very few highlights of the staff review and then a few corrections I'd like to recommend in the staff report that are fairly minor, if that's okay. One thing that hasn't been mentioned but is in the staff report, but I'll just reiterate very briefly here. There is a permit history. In 2006, the monopole you've just been describing, the existing facility on site, was approved administratively because it didn't trigger the CUP criteria. This application was applied for originally in 2022, as you've seen from the staff report. And as Angela Raymond just mentioned, there was some discussion, and I think Mr. Hoffman will address some of that in a minute, but that put the applications on pause while they work through some issues with the city of Seattle, which, as we know, is the underlying landowner of this reservoir property. And then eventually in 2024, the applications got rolling again, and that brought us to the point we're at today. I wanted to point out that the setting played a big role in our review. We've seen photos, and they're also scattered throughout the exhibits of existing conditions. And the setting at this sort of forested northwest edge of the reservoir property provides a lot of the context for our code analysis and the responses provided in the staff report in section 3. So that was a big factor in helping to meet the criteria for the various permits that are analyzed in the staff report. Surrounding uses are described in the staff report, but you'll note that they're a mix of some single-family residential and a mix of some very large parcels, especially to the northeast. There's a city park and a public utility-owned property, and then to the east southeast, there's another utility-owned parcel that's fairly large. So it's a mix of open properties and developed residential neighborhoods in the surrounding area. We've talked about public comments briefly. I indicate in the staff report that we believe staff has addressed the comments through the code analysis. So I won't go into that, but the code analysis obviously goes through visual aspects and compliance with FAA and FCC requirements for such poles. So the summary recommendation before I get to the minor corrections is approval with conditions. 15, as you mentioned, but I'll hit one of those in a minute and see if it might be more efficient to make it 14. So the minor corrections, there's just 4 of them, including the condition. On page 6, and I can just list them for you, or we can look at them. Maybe Yancey can pull up the staff report, which is Exhibit 1 in screen share, if you have that quick access to it, Yancey, from the website. But page 6, second paragraph from the bottom, in the last sentence, it says the application has submitted, and it's talking about a special report. It's actually applicant has submitted, just a minor correction there, but I want to call that out.
Where? Page
Page
6,
6, second paragraph from the bottom.
the one that begins comments regarding.
Yeah, and then last sentence of that paragraph. Last sentence of that second paragraph from the bottom, and Yancey's going to go there. It's page 6 toward the bottom. It's just above code analysis. Yeah, 2 lines above code analysis.
See that?
Yep.
Yes.
Oh, I see. Okay, yes. Applicant.
Yep. I think
Okay.
I let autocorrect catch me on that one, so I apologize for that. The next one, Yancey, if you could go down to page 8, we're going to look at 2 criterion responses. In E, let's see. Yeah, E, which is highlighted there. in the last sentence of the findings, just above the word conclusions, it says existing approximate gravel path, where Yancey is highlighted there. And that was intended to say approximately 12 to 15 foot wide gravel path. Just to clarify that sentence. And for context, this is that adjacent gravel path that skirts the project site that heads up, that connects the residential neighborhood to the south to the park to the north, skirting along the west side. So this is a clarification. We're going to jump down to criterion F just below that. In findings, the first sentence of the findings, just below where you are there, Yancy. It says the proposed facility in the very first line of findings. The proposed facility does not require modifications to the underlying zoning. Inadvertently left out the phrase standards to the underlying zoning. Nobody is requesting a rezone here, but the criterion is actually about zoning standards. So it should read no modifications to the standards of the underlying zoning. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay. Then the last item I have is just maybe to tighten things up a bit in the conditions. Yancy, could you go down to condition number 8 on page 14? This is a construction compliance with federal and state applicable federal and state requirements. That was more for construction. In condition 14 on the next page, Yancy.
Short version of the same thing.
Yeah, it's fairly redundant. One was construction, one was more operational, but as I reread them in retrospect, they're very redundant. So if it's okay with the examiner, I think 14 could be deleted.
Ms. Raymond, does the applicant object?
I do not object.
Thank you.
Thank you. That covers my brief intro. Are there any questions for me? And I know Mr. Hoffman will also be addressing the road question or discussion in just a minute, but do you have any questions for me before that?
Let's see, I wrote a couple of notes. Let me see, we may have already talked about them. On page 4, second paragraph from the bottom. Project site consists primarily of the existing monopole infrastructure within the larger open setting of the reservoir parcel, etc. I noted actually it's on one of the plan sheets as well. It's also visible in the Google Earth imagery. There is a lattice tower that would be to the southwest of the wireless communications enclosure area. I'm wondering whose tower is that? Is that Seattle City Utilities?
I actually don't know whose tower it is. Angela, do you mind if I defer that question to the applicant?
I don't mind.
Yeah, I'm pulling it up. I'm trying to pull it up now. I'm not familiar with whose tower that is.
I do know which tower you're referring to.
Yeah, it wouldn't be a carrier tower.
I'm trying to find the one that has the best image of it. On sheet 4 of exhibit 7, which is plan sheet SV2. It says there's an existing little square building, and just northeast of the little square building on a concrete pad is a radio tower. Height equals 38.7 feet. So it's about a 39 foot high lattice tower. Let me resolve it this way. Is that tower related to the WCF facility?
No, sir.
Okay. And from the Google Earth pictures, it doesn't look particularly new. It kind of looks like it's a well-weathered tower. Does that seem to be a fair
Yeah, I'm
conclusion?
looking at it at Google Earth, I believe.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that is not associated with any wireless carriers and would just be a radio tower.
Okay, thank you. And page 15, recommended condition 10. Subpart B, I'll read the first three sentences that lead into the series of three subparts, and then I'll jump to subpart B. Security fencing shall be appropriately screened landscaping. I'm a little unclear about that. The security fence is to be screened landscaping, or the security fence is to be screened by appropriate landscaping, or
Yeah,
I'm just unclear. And I
it looks
figure if
like we
I'm
dropped a
unclear,
word there.
the permittee might be unclear too.
Yeah. You know, the intent there was to bring down the criterion as referenced at the bottom of this condition. And so, Yancey, if we could refer back up to, let's see, it's 1868-080 Development Standards E 1 through 3. So it should be just a couple pages up. So it talks about that's right there. Okay. It was an abbreviation of this section that it appears to it dropped a word that made it unclear. So we could clarify that by instead just placing the wording in from this condition, which would be E2,
Okay.
because that was the intent of that condition. I think there's a little, I
Okay.
summarized a bit, and I apologize for dropping a word there that made it unclear.
Maybe it just ought to say it shall comply with 1868-080 E 1 through 3.
Staff would be happy with that, and that is the intent of the condition.
Okay.
The applicant does have a question on that. I guess I overlooked that condition slightly. Am I able to ask a question now? Or
You are. But
okay,
we're going to be a little
so
more informal than we would normally be, but I think it would be for the good of the order. Go ahead.
all right. It says through the use of appropriate landscaping materials. So we're not proposing additional landscaping with this application. What is the city's requirements regarding the word landscaping?
Yeah, so that's a good question. This, I think the answer is tied to how this sits facing the forested area to the northwest. And so, and I'll defer to our director on this, but I'll toss this out for discussion, is that our intent was to apply landscaping if determined necessary at the building permit. At this time, we have not required landscaping and did not for that fencing because it faces, again, the forested area and then descending slopes. There are no houses actually facing that fence. So, and I will defer to our director for this, but I'm proposing that we leave some flexibility in E2, which is B in the condition, to require landscaping as needed or if needed at building permit, but not mandatory. And Director Hoffman, I'd be happy to hear your thoughts on that.
Why don't we go ahead and swear in Mr. Hoffman at this point? Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you'll be offering in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. And for the record, would you tell us your name and how to spell it?
Thank you. My full name is Mark Hoffman, spelled M-A-R-K, last name spelled H-O-F-M-A-N, just one F.
Okay.
And I'm the Community Development Director for the city.
Thank you. Go ahead.
To address what's on the screen, what I would suggest is due to what is proposed and its location next to the critical area and out of sight of the street to the south with a major reservoir to the east, compliance could be achieved with just number one, 6 feet height, not 10 feet, 15 feet. I don't know that landscaping or coloring of the security fencing at the monopole would make any difference. As you come south, if any fencing is later added or proposed, then something, like green coating, not to the extent of a tennis court fabric or slats or anything like that. But because the site is so far north on the site, I would recommend that they could achieve uh, condition 15 with just limiting the height of the fence.
Okay, thank you, sir.
And then I have a follow-up on the driveway question, if you would like.
Sure, go ahead.
The way staff reads it on the page that was prior up, crushed surfacing base course and crushed surfacing top course. So I believe that's sheet C3. Where I would point the record to is sheet C1. The city's review in the ministerial permits that come later would require a solid asphaltic concrete or cement approach as it hits the right of way. Beyond 20 feet, 25 feet, the city does not mind the note on sheet C3 about the crushed base and the crushed top course.
Where is sheet C1? What PDF,
Still with Exhibit 7,
right?
and then
PDF what?
two sheets up on the lower left corner, you'll see a
Oh, okay, that's
solid
PDF 5.
You'll see a solid approach leaving the right of way on sheet C1.
I do.
That would satisfy the city.
Okay. So we've just got a solid paved approach, and then we have a crushed surfacing 12-foot plus or minus uh, surface to take you up to the tower location.
That would satisfy public works requirements with the right of way permit and any building permit. So if Seattle Public Utilities is requiring paved driveway, that might be what they mean. If they are requiring the entire driveway access all the way up to the monopole to be paved, that would not be a city requirement.
Okay. But if they made the applicant do that, would that cause a problem to the city?
Not for the city because they're both impervious surfaces because of the compaction. So whether it's crushed gravel or asphalt, it makes no
Okay.
difference on the review.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Those are the only questions I had for you, Mr. Greetham.
Thank you.
Mr. McLean, has anybody shown up in the audience?
No, sir.
Okay.
I do have a
Um,
clarifying question regarding the landscaping. So are we just going to have the requirement of the 6-foot height fence and no additional landscaping required?
I'm thinking about it.
Okay, sounds good. It's difficult with the city of Seattle and the reservoir. They protect that area quite heavily, and I haven't spoken to them about proposing any type of landscaping.
Okay.
So I wouldn't know how that would be incorporated and or irrigated.
Mr. Examiner, may I add a comment that might assist with your decision on this?
Sure.
Exhibits 8, 9, and 14 all contain, and I'm sure you know this, but I'll repeat it, all contain extensive photos that give a sort of a good view.
Mhm.
Some of them actually do show that side area too that we're talking about.
Right. Okay. I will definitely consider all of that information. Does the city wish to offer any closing statements?
No, my part. Although Yancey, you could stop sharing now. Thanks for pulling those up. None on my part.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Raymond, any closing statement?
I do not.
Thank you. This then concludes the open record hearing on applications 2022-WC-0001 and 2022-CU-0001. The time is now 10:52 a.m. Our hearing is adjourned. Mr. McLean, you may stop the recording if you would, please.